So I'm curious because you're in those rooms, and do you guys get a feel when coaches are talking? Do you kind of go by the answers when you guys know you want to ask about a player specifically, or do you go in with kind of that mindset and you wait for the opening?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the coach. With John Butler, you kind of look for an opening. You're looking for a crease, and like you know, there were a couple possibilities that were given yesterday. So there was a few names that were dropped. But for the most part, John Butler likes to, I think, keep it more on big picture personnel or like a grouping type questions, not single guys out, which I understand on the defensive side of the ball, because if you think about it, like it would be really hard for him, for instance, to start naming like the situation in the secondary and not have like people just jump to conclusions thinking they know stuff based off a comment or two. So there's
Right,
so
like
many
like like,
guys.
hey, this guy playing the dime. Oh, this guy could
Yeah,
play in the big nickel. Oh, this guy could play in our regular nickel. Like, yeah, I get it, right? Because
I think.
he protects
Yeah.
himself from going down that rabbit hole. You mean? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, I think John Butler understands well that we talk about everything that gets said,
Mm.
and so like even when he was asked, like what do you do best right now, he answered that as saying, well, I got to think about this basically because then it could be perceived as we don't do this over here very well if I say this that we do this good. And so I think he's very cognizant of that fact, and he's right on it. But yeah, I mean he was asked about Williams Neri and Jordan Ochoa, and I think there's certain guys where like he understands what the person's going for. But to your first question, I do think there are certain coaches they're not going to just go on and on about specific guys, and you kind of you work around that and understand different ways to talk about things.
Mm.
BC, I thought it was interesting that he did choose to talk about Williams and Ochoa kind of specifically when, like you said, he did kind of dance around some of the other more specific questions. I'm curious. Obviously, those guys both play on the defensive line or jack positions. I'm curious because we've been having this discussion right before you came on here about the defensive line. What were your impressions from open practice of them and just how they faced up against the offensive line there?
I thought it was a good like give and take, honestly, between defense and offense. Like in August, you're always, I think, kind of hoping to walk away from that, where you say, well, the offense had these flashes of good plays, but I also saw this from the defense, where it's kind of a trade off. And I thought that was represented pretty well. I'd be lying if I didn't say I am curious as to like who guys like 5 through 8 are going to ultimately end up being on that D line,
That's what I told you
as
before.
far as filling that in. But I also keep in mind you mentioned like Jordan Ochoa and guys like that, like Williams McGahee and Desan McCullough. I think of the first four that we think of on the D line: Keona Davis, Cam Lenhart, Elijah Julie, Van Poppel.
Mm-hmm.
And then I factor in the jacks too with that. Like you can do a lot of variations with that, with McCullough and McGahee and Ochoa. And so that gets you to 7 guys right there. And then you've got sort of these wild cards that I think are really interesting in Waneri, and there's guys, bigger bodies you can plug in for different things with I don't know who it's going to be, Dylan Parrott, Mason Golden, Nash and Murphy, whatever. They do have options, but I don't know as well as I would like to, I guess, who's going to be necessarily like kind of 5 through 8 on the D line after the top 4 when it gets down to like the middle of October. So that's going to be really interesting to me to see who's got the goods as this season plays out, and who they trust early on, sort of for some of those reps to give you depth.
And I think sometimes, I don't know, maybe this is just the probably the coach keep peace in the family. While I don't think anybody says anything they don't believe, I do think sometimes you do coach guys that need to hear their name mentioned just from
Or some guys need a little positive reinforcement.
they need some reinforcement, right? So there's always, I think, that give and take too. You may have just asked a guy to move. He may be having questions about, if he can hack it, and you could need it. Like there's lots of gamesmanship, I think, that can be played sometimes when coaches take the podium, which is also why I think if they had their druthers, they just wouldn't go there. They'd keep it topical. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that. So, I mean, that's why I never get out of sorts when there is a coach that's sort of in that mode, especially at this point in camp where it's grind time and it's not easy to just like, you don't want to give too much flattery to certain guys, even if they're doing really well. You want to just keep pushing. When it goes to the D line that we were talking about, there's a couple like developments that have happened that, I offer a slight challenge. Like for instance, Jalen George was a really, and he still can be, but he was a really interesting pickup out of the portal, I thought.
Ravi loves him some Jalen George.
Yeah, he looks the part, but he's been in that green jersey and kind of didn't get the full run up in the spring and stuff like that. So you kind of work around that because, back in January, if we had this conversation about the D-line, you'd probably say, well, I'd like to pencil him in as one of those guys who has a spot. So he's got to work up to that. Even some of the freshmen, not that you would count the true freshmen, not that you'd give them a bulk amount of reps, but like, Malcolm Simpson's not really available. And I think there was actually some hope like a guy like him could get in quickly, kind of like Keona did last year, where you give him a sampling. So there are a couple of those little things that they have to work past with that group. But I thought the most interesting comment from John Butler yesterday was, you might have played it too, is like, we're not the same as we were last year with our personnel with Ty and Nash. We'll play differently to our people's strengths, basically. And you kind of got to remember that in this conversation. It's not just a apples to apples, replace this guy comparison. You're always adjusting to the skill sets of your guys, and you tweak things, and you can have success in a different sort of way. It doesn't have to look exactly like it did last year.
Yeah, I think situationally, there are a couple things I like that he said yesterday. Number one, working in some young guys in the back end so they can get ramped up. Number one, but 1A was he gives you the opinion. You want to play as many good players as you have. I always tell people, as a player, you want a coach to feel uncomfortable that you're not in the game, right? If a coach isn't missing your presence, he's probably not going to be in a hurry to get you in. And I like the fact that they seem to, Coach Rhule has echoed this sentiment. Coach Butler has echoed this sentiment. They're going to try to play to your strengths. Just go to work. Be a good football player every day. Don't compare yourself to whatever. We'll figure out the rest. I did get the sense that maybe they don't have a complete jack, the run stopper, pass rusher, but if you can rush the passer, you'll rush the passer. If you're good in run stopping, we'll figure out run stopping packages. If you're good covering in the slot, we'll figure out, how to maybe play you in the dime. If you're a really good tackler, maybe we'll figure out how to, I did like the fact that situationally, if they feel like they just have a lot of football players, it gives them a lot of options to be flexible with how they want to approach it.
Yeah. I agree with that. And it's, I was wondering as you were talking there, Damon, is there a guy, like everybody always says Ty, Nash, and like Jamari, like replacing them. Is there someone else though from that unit last year that's actually like to you more interesting that they're trying to
it's easy.
MJ Sherman.
Close.
Okay.
John Bullock.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Why Bullock? Because Bullock was good against the run. He was a very good blitzer. He could play out in space. You didn't have to really take him off the field a ton. So, like, my counter to that would be, okay, if you like hyphenated last name and Bauer as your run stoppers, like downhill guys, okay, that's Bullock. If you like a guy that can cover or maybe play over a back or a number 3 out, that would be Javen Wright. If you like a blitzer and a guy that can gap you out and get downhill, that could be Shavers Jr.
Yeah.
Those, I just mentioned 3 or 4 guys. A lot of that Bullock did.
Could all do, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a guy that I think is pretty – well, he may not have been – and listen, he's in an NFL camp as a priority free agent. So he's clearly a really good player. I just think we undersell his impact from a year ago because you didn't have to take him off the field. And they may have to do it a little bit different this year situationally based on what the actual down and what's actually going on. You know what I mean? I think we miss Sherman is a good one, but I think Bullock is another one where he kind of could do it all.
Yeah, that's good info. And I heard Ravi say Sherman because that was the name that was kind of in my head.
I do think Sherman was underappreciated. I do.
Yeah,
he's very good. He's very good at the point of attack.
Yeah. So I mean, but this is where again, guys with different skill sets, you're finding their niche and what they can excel at, and you play to that. And this is where you trust coaching a little bit with that too. And so. There are challenges to it, but I think you also see opportunities where there's certain things you can probably be better at than you were a year ago, and that makes up for some of those things. You know, he mentioned the other day, it's about finding 11 that are cohesive, that understand the strengths and weaknesses of a call, and then working with that in mind. And that's the biggest thing that's going to, have to happen for this defense. And the tackling part too. I do think that's such an interesting thing as we get in these last 3 weeks before the game. You only get 9 full padded practices. So often that first week, especially if it's a game where it's like a touchdown point spread or within that, it's going to come down to who covers that base item the best. And it tackles well. Like I thought 2 years ago in that opener at Minnesota, Nebraska tackled actually phenomenal for an opening game. Obviously it leaked away, shouldn't have. But if they could duplicate that sort of effort for an opener tackling wise, I think they'll be in really good shape in Kansas City. That's going to be a big topic, I think.
Yeah, BC, I couldn't agree more. It's almost like you're tugging at my heartstrings. The 2 things that isn't it funny? Right. The 2 things that I love to process and walk through about good players, because, Ravi does a good job of kind of like planning my strengths of how to play defense and what you can do. And I said, it's interesting. One of the things that's underappreciated about playing defense and being good at it is where am I vulnerable? Like, what are we willing to give up? And do I know that pre-snap based on formation? Like, that is absolutely critical if you want to be a good defensive team. And the other thing that you just hit on was tackling, right? And I know, Coach Rhule used a couple of guys after the scrimmage on Saturdays, guys that brought physical presence and tackled. It was Tony White's number one thing that you had to have in the secondaries. You got to be able to tackle. Coach Butler is the same way. He talks about it all the time. Addison Williams talked about it, right? Spent time saying, hey, listen, the game is different now. All 11 guys got to be able to tackle, right? If those guys get guys to the ground, scheme is overrated. I hate to say it as a guy that likes to be creative, but if you get guys to the ground with some tenacity, scheme's overrated. I mean, Miami played a 4-3 under front for years in the 90s because they could run and tackle. Wasn't super complicated. Like, they just got after you.
I mean, to your point, and sorry, BC, to cut you off there, but like to your point,
no, that's right.
How complicated was the Tampa 2?
Yeah, not very.
But they had guys that could run and cover and tackle.
Yeah, we know we're vulnerable deep hole.
Right.
Oh, we got Derek Brooks. He may cover a guy on a seam route
35
yards downfield. We can play that way. We can rush with our front four because we have Sapp, Simeon Rice, McFarland. I don't have to call a lot of pressures.
Probably not getting to that deep hole very often.
Rondé Barber can't cover, man. Guess what he can do?
Tackle.
And he can play a squat corner.
Yeah. Well, and then you got I mean, to your point, DB, like
it wasn't fancy.
Yeah, how many times do you actually see a guy actually just run free on anything, right? There's usually a broken tackle close to the line of scrimmage. There's we don't that often see a guy
Just get turned loose.
Just get turned loose and it's gone. Like
except in Columbus.
If you can get a right. But if you can tackle 90% of the time, no matter what you're running, you're gonna have an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I thought last year, by no means was Nebraska a bad tackling team, but I think Rhule has said this multiple times. I thought they took a step back compared to how they actually tackled in 23, and that's going to be a huge part of this season. If you can kind of get back to those 23 standards, which I thought they were just a really good tackling team for most of the year. So
imagine if you tackle well against. I'll just take 2 games.
Iowa.
I won't even give you Illinois.
Iowa.
That's a gimme. Take UCLA and USC. You win both those games schematically if you tackle better.
Yeah, absolutely, you do. And there were the signs early on that there were some struggles, like against Northern Iowa. I know some guys were out, but that was an example early in the year that's like, okay, this isn't quite as tightened up even early in the season as the year before. And so that's such a big storyline over these next few weeks. Obviously, we won't know till you get to Arrowhead, but to have a team that excels in the first couple weeks of the season in that particular part of the game, such an important part, is going to decide who in college football gets off to a good jump, because the rule restrictions really have made it a challenge. It always has been to not be sloppy the first week, but I think it's especially so these days.
Yeah, Nebraska hits the vice drill. I mean, Ravi is right when he says Iowa. Todd brought up the specific that jogged my memory. You get Caleb.
Yeah, you get KJ. Ground, it's over.
You get KJ to the ground. That game's over.
Yeah, the game's over.
And it was a vice drill too. So you got a triangle. You got a point, and you've got 2 sides on that pyramid. There's no reason he should have got out.
You have to tackle that guy.
Yeah,
and then you win the game.
I mean, scheme's good, right? Yeah. Guys,
you had the guys in the spots to make the play.
Yeah,
that's all scheme can do.
That's good pull. That's good pull.
BC, I know we've been talking a lot about defense here. Let's switch to the other side of the ball while we still have you. Anybody stick out to you on offense that maybe you weren't expecting?
I wouldn't say not expecting. I mean, I think Mekhi Nelson continues to make a good push at that in that running back competition.
Agreed.
That didn't surprise me.
It surprised me how good he looked, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I expected him to look good. And I know DB's been a big fan of Mekhi for a while now, but
a year ago at this time. Not to be specific.
It kind of stunned is too strong of a word, but how good he looks running the football. And that's not, I mean, I thought Emmett looked good too, but I don't think we've seen a guy run the ball that instinctually as just a natural runner of the football in a really long time in Nebraska.
He has the traits to elevate that explosive part of the run game that has been missing. And again, you go back to, I always try to talk about stuff that coaches say, because it kind of confirms what you see. And you would hear Rhule always talk last year about, we got to make that second level, third level guy miss. We've got to turn some of these 10, 15-yard runs into, the ones that start up the fight song type of deals. You need, if you can get one of those every other week, even that can make all the difference in a couple games in your win-loss column. And so I do think he has those traits. I don't want to oversell it, but yeah, he looked like he was very impressive. And then you combine that with the comment Dana had about him and said, I'll kick him in his butt if he drops off from this, but he's looking good. And we always like Dana when he says the candor about stuff that wasn't good last year. And so I take that same mindset when he kind of pumps someone up, like he's going to kind of tell it like it is. He likes this guy, how he's looking, and I see why. So that was nice. And then I thought, the wide receivers beyond the ones we always talk about, you see that there is that actual potential, I think, to have like a 5th, 6th, 7th guy who are really pushing things. And that's something in off seasons past, we've always kind of tried to talk into existence, but it hasn't necessarily been there by the time you get to the late fall. And I'm hopeful that they can change that this year with guys like Quinn Clark and Keelan Smith and Jeremiah Jones sort of, on the fringe, but right there to help if needed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I go back to a couple things because I think it all ties together with Coach Holgerson's mentality. I didn't really fall in love with Mackay until I watched him actually practice. The Saturday scrimmage for 1890 last year was easy, right? I'm just like, when I said to Ravi, I said, look, I said, that guy down there, I said, just watch him move. He moves different.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched his mentality, right? And I would always joke that we're going on like a while now, BC, and people don't get it unless you got biracial folks in your family, right? And I'm like, people think these pretty boys, these pretty light skinned guys are kind of soft. I said, he's anything but soft. And I would joke about it, BC.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to laugh because it sounds inappropriate, but it's just something we joke about. I used to say it to Caleb all the time. And then I would watch him, and then I listened to Coach Holgerson at the bowl game because everybody wondered who the player he was talking about was. It was Mackay. Hey, I found a young guy. It was everybody I think I can say that now. Whatever. And for whatever the reason, it didn't unfold the way that they wanted it to in the bowl game late in the season, and it pissed Mackay off. And then in the spring, they're on him about pass pro and what he needs to do, and it further aggravated him, right? So Mackay takes matters into his own hands, and he hears Holgerson throw him a little sugar early in the week. Hey, this guy can play, but I'm gonna kick him in the rear end if he goes backwards. Holgerson knows what buttons to push, and he's got the perfect guy that he can push those buttons with because he's seen him respond in the offseason. Same as I told the little anecdotal story about Quinn Clark. He was going to play last year, right? We heard it all week. Hey, I like this young guy, Quinn Clark. And then people wonder, oh, he didn't play. We'll say, and fans will say, oh, it's just coach speak. Quinn Clark will say, man, I couldn't get lined up. Your boy couldn't get lined up this week. And then you hear Coach Holgerson say before fall practice starts, you got to be able to get lined up, right? If you can't, nothing drives me crazier than if you. So to hear guys take on what's important to their coach is the biggest sign in development, in my opinion. Until the little things are as important to the players as they are to the coach, you cannot win. It doesn't matter. It's like, you ever been in a relationship where something is super important to you and your partner is dismissive and it drives you crazy, and it doesn't really work until it becomes important to them? You typically won't go backwards.
Yeah, it's not going to not become important to you.
They have to see it as important as well. That's what I like about the young guys' development and Dana's leadership, because it's not like he's asking you to guess.
No, he's telling you.
He's telling you, right? And I get it. It's not for everybody.
That's all you can ask for as a player, though, right?
But that's all. That's what I was just getting ready to say. That's, hey, where am I at? What do I need to do? And then you just let the chips fall where they may. That's why I like Addison Williams, because the theme seems to be similar amongst all the coaches. And BC, correct me if I'm wrong, don't you think it started when Coach Rhule said in the offseason, don't tell me what these guys can't do. This is spring. Let's figure out what they can do. Do you remember when he opened spring with that philosophy?
Yeah.
I think doesn't it seem like that's what we're hearing now?
Yeah, I think so. And I as you were talking, I was thinking back. I think this semi connects. I thought there was an important moment. I think it was the Wisconsin game. Both things happened. I believe that was the game where Nebraska played Borkercher and Lindenmeyer most of the tight end snaps.
Oh,
and
yeah,
Fedoni he had a few, and everybody was kind of buzzing about it. And this isn't to knock Thomas Fedoni at all. I'm wishing him the best. I'm just saying that was a moment where you're like, oh man, the guy who's always sort of been first or second up in that room, he's down a little bit this week, and I have to think that's it kind of goes when you were talking about Quinn Clark. It's like line up right, and I'm not saying Fedoni wasn't doing that, but like
the standard is the standard.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's guys understand, like, okay, he is not afraid to go with who got it done Monday through Thursday, whatever that week, and switch it up a little bit here. I think that was the same game also where Bonner, who they love, I think he fumbled in that game. And he was kind of rolling along after the USC game where he was getting the ball and stuff, and he didn't play as much after that. Like, it was a little like, okay, you lost it once. Let's give you a little break over there. Those two things kind of stuck out to me, and I've always kind of kept them in the back of my mind. And I do think it kind of connects to what you're talking about and what Rhule has said about Dana and just how he works through things. He's like, doesn't matter how much you're paid. It doesn't matter what you did even last week necessarily. It's like, what are you doing this week in your preparation for what's right in front of us? And I think guys do have a good understanding of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Remember, Coach Rhule, I think he said it this offseason or before fall camp about Dana. There was a receiver who got pulled out of a drill. He was coming back. He'd been sick, couldn't get lined up right. Got pulled out of practice. And, short story long, that guy ends up leaving the school. Like, he transfers. He's a good player. Right? But it's like, hey, this guy's not with us. Get him out of here. Get me the next guy. Right? And I just think if it boils down to survival of the fittest and you keep recruiting competitive guys, ultimately it's going to pay dividends. That's just kind of in my heart of hearts what I think happens.
Yeah, I think that too, because I do think there's this thinking you can't coach guys that way anymore. And I think if you find the right mindset, you absolutely can, and you can excel with it.
And they've got a culture of love, right?
That's when you can get away with coaching guys hard.
Because love doesn't mean letting you do what you want to do. It means caring enough about you to make sure that you get it right. You're not self-destructive, right?
Yeah.
100%.
Yep. And we were talking about Mackay. I was going to say one more thing about him.
Yeah.
Give EJ Barthel credit on that with the recruiting. I mean, that was a guy he was in on really early in the process, and he's been tied into a couple of those guys. We'll see what happens with Quinton Ives. That's another example where he was in on early, and we'll see how that plays out. But Mackay was a guy he absolutely spotted and liked as what he could do before a lot of other people, and that's part of the reason why he's at Nebraska now. So if he becomes a real success story, we'll see. Got to go prove it. You got to remember like how that all started.
You're 100% spot on with the relationship between Mackay and EJ. EJ, it was early. Mackay was probably 15, and EJ was. That's right. That's a really, really good point, because I know a lot of people sometimes like to bash Coach Barthel. Relationship building isn't something he has a problem with. That's for sure.
He deserves props on that. If that one ended, even now, you got a good player to develop. So that was a great prospect to get.
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247 BC. Appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, B.